city will burn, I'm gonna build one high.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is July 23rd, YC127, and this is the EVE Universe Show! Welcome, 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 guys. It is Tuesday. That means that I've streamed twice this week already, 2 days in a row. Hell yeah, like the stream to show your appreciation. But we do have stuff to cover today. Wait, hold on. Did I actually... Am I even correct about that? Hold on, I think I just lied. Did I do anything yesterday? Hold on. Now I'm confused. Am I just, like, hallucinating? What day is it today? Hold on. It's Wednesday. I'm sorry. I streamed on Monday. It is Wednesday. Whew. All right. Well, you know, I lost today. It's fine. It happens. It's fine. It happens. To me all the time. But yeah, so it is Wednesday. It is in fact the 23rd. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I forgot. Yep, yesterday was other stuff. It's fine. It's fine. It's Wednesday. I did get the day right. Come on, give me that. Okay, so we've got some stuff to cover today. My goal, okay. Look, guys, the tanking video is probably cursed. But and it's kind of because there's a lot to cover, and I keep trying to go over it in my head to figure out how I want to present it. So today, I hope to at least give an attempt at doing the tanking guide. It should be fine, but we do have some news to cover before we jump into that. So we've got the there's a mass test tomorrow, and we got some New Eden news. So first, hold on 1 second. I just got a message. I got to check it out. Okay. So I am so bad at days of the week. No, I remember now. Yeah. Yesterday I let it slip by, but that's fine because there wasn't. I mean, there was news yesterday. A lot of the stuff that we're going to cover today is from yesterday, but that's right. I actually like made the decision. It was like, streaming 2 days in a row. Like I'm trying to, either way, whatever. I'm sorry. You know, this is a one-man show, right? Like, I'm trying my best here. Like the stream, please. Consider supporting. It really helps. All right. So, hey, Ragtag, you don't even have to go back into the past now. You're here on time. That's part of the advantage of me starting an hour late, I guess. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into things. How you guys doing? Malin was just telling me about how. Hold on, can I show the pictures? Can I show the picture of the system? It doesn't actually show the system, right? Okay. So, as many of you may know, in the latest, in the Legion expansion, one of the things that they did was they added in new exploration sites. They're not actually new exploration sites, but they are basically you can now put in your sovereignty an upgrade that effectively spawns your own personal guaranteed version of existing exploration sites, right? And there's two things that are different about them. One, they have the word detected at the beginning of them to let you know that they're one of the special sites. And two, they have the chance to escalate. And when you go to the escalation, that's where you get the new triplot scanning module that we talked about last time. And also the new wedge implants, I think, come from there too. And I think maybe some other stuff. But either way, the point is that, like, so supposedly you put one of these upgrades in, and it spawns sites within a certain number of jumps. I thought it was like 5 jumps. I can't remember if they ever explicitly told us the rules behind it. But the idea is that, like, it makes sure that you have these guaranteed sites within that realm region of area. Now, the fun thing about this is that while I think it's only like 5 systems or 5 sites per upgrade scattered throughout the whole thing, yeah, I think it's 5 jumps too. So you can actually have that upgrade in multiple systems in range, which will then like they'll stack, right? And so the most extreme version of that I've seen so far was posted by Malin in our... Yeah, they don't spawn in Zarzak. That's honestly probably good. I can't imagine it being a very good thing to try to go to an exploration site in Zarzak. You might just die instantly. But, so the most extreme version of this that I have seen so far comes from Malin. Yeah, they can spill through to the other side of Zarzak. Look at that. And what's interesting about this system, we're not going to tell you guys what system it is because that, you know, whatever. But what's fun about this is that, according to Malin, this is not even in a sovereign system. So there's a sovereignty that has so many of these sites that it appears in... well, if you want, whatever. If it appears in angel space. So that means either they are going through Zarzak or it's sovereignty that's near angel space. Well, there you go. He says it's RA TAC NXN in curse. So hold on. Let's go ahead and look at this system. RA TAC NXN. Okay, why, Gizmo? Come on, Matt. It's because the goons have them installed in a lot of Scalding Pass? Okay, okay. Why did you just give away the system? I'm screwed. Hey, man, that was up to him. Now, there was also a conversation that Malin had with the locals, who were very unfriendly. But at the same time, as I said, I think I can kind of understand that. Because, you know, if I had a system like that, I too would be fairly defensive about it. So let's see. There's GTAC. Oh, wait. Yeah, GTAC O. Hold on. So RA is 2 jumps from GTAC O. Tanks a lot for the geese? I don't get the joke, but yeah, GTAC O, very important system because it's adjacent to Zarzak. But where... You're saying that it's coming from... Oh, Scalding Pass. There it is. So sovereignty. Bright Side of Death. Here, let's see if we can... Corporation, Faction Warfare, Services. Is it under Corporation? No. Is it under... Sovereignty. All factions and alliances? Okay. So the green systems are going to be angels, and these orange systems are going to be other things. So you're getting potentially sites from these systems over here. Oh, okay. So over here, hold on. So this system here, which is the beginning of Goonswarm space, is 1, 2, 3. So yeah, you could be getting sites from a few systems over here, and a few systems over here, and allegedly through Zarzak. So I don't know if there's, like, that's already 3 systems, so I'm not sure. I think it might not be because, like, yeah, all of this is NPC space. So I don't think it's coming through Zarzak. Yeah, it's within range of Scalding Pass in a couple of directions, right? Because, like, so where were we? RA, yeah, here we go. So if you look here, like 1, 2, and you're already outside of Curse, and then so hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now you're already into Goonswarm space. Is a 9 stacked system, 20 stacked effects, VOL Tech MI. VOL. Well, what's crazy about that is that because it's so close to Zarzak, it's actually really easy to get there, right? Like, you can get there very consistently if you wanted to. This is a bad plan. So VOL Tech MI also kind of nearby, but this one, yeah. So if you look, this one is actually adjacent to Goonswarm space, who are very good at farming stuff. So I would assume that this whole area is going to be delicious. Rift shows the stacking by the upgrades. What is Rift? Am I learning things today? Bad plans are usually the best for streaming. I mean, yeah, that's true. We should go check it out at some point. It's an Intel app. You should link that to me. You're still there, by the way? Good luck. I mean, they're already trying to kill you, so it's not like it changes much. That's exciting. That's a cool thing. Like, it'd be worth doing the little incursion into that area and then, like, messing with them and then, like, stealing all their stuff, right? Like, that's way cooler than ESS's. We should just go and, like, a bunch of Stratioses? Maybe? Nesters would be hilarious. All right, hold on. riftforeve.online. Oh. Okay. Oh, so this is like a... You have to download it. I've never seen this one. Golly, this looks good. Wait. What the hell? I'm gonna have to check this out. Hold on. Who did this? Nohus? Yeah, this is really cool. Why haven't I heard of this? I'm gonna check this out. Intel channel monitoring, real-time Intel feeds, powerful and flexible alerts. View Intel on the map. That is so cool. I like this a lot. Manage your asset. I'm going to have to check this out. This looks really good. We'll have to look into it. Thank you so much, Gizmo, for bringing this up. All right. Am I even showing you guys? No, I'm not. I'm not even showing you guys. Sorry. I'm sorry, Malin. I'm sorry. Here we go. So, Intel channel monitoring, real-time Intel feed. Like, there's different filters, location, distance, type, sorting, and you can, like, see... I'm assuming these are kills. Powerful and flexible alerts. They've got a good, like, theming to it. It looks, like, consistent with EVE Online, too. Hold on. Built-in configurable map shows the information you want. Planning your route. I really like this idea, potentially. I wonder if it works Right-click a system anywhere on the map and set it as autopilot. So yeah, this is using a lot of the API stuff, which is awesome. Nice. Manage your assets. This feels like it could be really good. I wonder what limitations there are to it, but definitely worth looking into. So I have it set to show me Xflow upgrades. That's cool. I'm going to post it in chat for everybody. And hell, I'll even put it in the description down below. So that way people can find it. Okay, so that was a cool little distraction. But let's go ahead and jump into our first topic of the day. Fire and Smoke mass test tomorrow. Hey, what's up, Mad Hatter 07? Explosive Capsuleers. It is that special time again. It's time to rain fire on your friends and enemies on the 24th of July, which as of this recording, if you're watching this live. Oh, you sent me a link of what it looks like in Curse. Hold on. Okay. Ah, stop. So that, what is this saying? This is saying 20 times the upgrades. How does it know, I wonder? Have people like fed it APIs for the different alliances so it's able to read that information? Like that seems interesting. How does it know? Well, I think I'm pretty sure that the API should only show that information if you have like authorization. So like people with the correct roles would have had to have added the API into this system. You feed it the system and what upgrades it has, and it figures out the amount of stacking. Yeah, but like it has to be getting like it's a spy app basically, right? Like what was it? There was an app that used to exist, or there was a website that used to exist. Gosh, I can't remember its name anymore. Where basically people would feed APIs to it, and so you could read all of the alliance mails of all of the major alliances because it worked like almost like a WikiLeaks of EVE Online. I feel like this is kind of like that, which is sort of sketchy because as far as I know, with the current API system, it's actually against the rules to use it, quote unquote, to spy. In other words, use it in a way that the person who's giving you the API would not expect or want you to. That said, the people that are feeding it the API are clearly expecting it to do this. So even though it might be a form of spying, it's probably still okay because it's the spy that's making the choice to feed that information to it. It isn't like they're getting that API from some other false pretense and then using it for this, I assume. So this is an interesting one. This is I want to know more about how this works. But either way, I digress. Let's talk explosions. All right. So did you manually add the info of which systems have the upgrade on in your own map? I assume not. I mean, that would be... I mean, so then that would just be Gizmo's best guess at that point. Oh! Wait, hold on. Gizmo, so you told it... How do you know what upgrades are where? Have you just, like, gone through every single system in that area and hacked them? This is some emergent shit. Wow. Okay, hold on. Hold up. Hold up. So you're telling me that Malin this morning randomly discovered a system with a whole bunch of sites in it, and it just so happened that you, Gizmo, have gone through that area and mapped it out completely? That's what happened today? That's what's happening right now? No, Malak, this is not a Final Fantasy XIV stream. Unless you're a member of the Alliance and have a list of all the upgrades. But is this just a coincidence that you've happened to have scanned this area that Malin is in? How many systems have you scanned? This is incredible. I need to know more. Come on, Streamlabs. Most of Scalding Pass. I'm assuming you're anti-goons? Is that why you've done this? Okay. So, is it because you know that Goon Swarm has a bunch of these things up, and so you wanted to be able to keep track of their stuff? Like, what led you to do... I need to know more. Tell me everything. You should come on comms and tell me all about this. You just stumbled upon it. Fascinating. And it just so happens that you just knew the information that about the system that Malin was in. That was just complete coincidence. How excellent. Been in Curse doing exploration. That's so cool. Okay. Well, I mean, Nullsec is a big place. So the fact that Malin figured this out today and Gizmo happens to be here, I think is like, this is a amazing example of why Eve is so frackin' cool sometimes. But with all that said, so if somebody else downloaded this program, they wouldn't have that information, I assume, right? They would also have to go in and insert all of this information? Right. Are you able to share that information? Or is it literally like everybody, like, I mean, I'm not asking you to share that information, but like, do you have the capacity to be like, here, load this file. It has all the stuff I've scouted. That's so cool. Oh my God. You do a copy paste of the info? Oh, that's actually not too bad. Well, I appreciate you sharing with us your private information. That is very cool of you. Oh, and you're the guy who also won the GPU before. That's cool. Well, thanks for hanging out, and thank you once again for contributing to the stream. That is awesome. So does this application, like, could this application replace Pathfinder? Is there a sharing? No, because there's no server component, right? So you couldn't, like, use it to easily coordinate, like, a wormhole corp or something like that, right? Unless there's a way, like, you could do a thing in Discord where you post the information so that way people can just paste it into there. It doesn't work in wormholes. All right, well, so this plus something like Pathfinder would be super useful. This is great. We're going to look into this more. Anywho, thank you so much again for Gizmo. Let's go ahead and jump into the mass test information. So it is that special time again. It's like SMT. I don't know what SMT is either. I feel so... I've never felt so, like, out of the loop when it comes to Eve in, like, over a decade. Oh, man. Yeah, I saw that they have a Discord, but I don't want to like pull up that kind of stuff on stream randomly. Okay. You use SMT. Okay. Definitely something to look into. Maybe I need to update my tools section on the Notion or something. But yeah. Whew. Back to the mass test. It is that special time again. Time to rain fire on your friends and your enemies. Is this? Yep. On the 24th of July, which is as of this recording tomorrow at 1700 to 1900 UTC, which is Eve time, we're calling on all Intrepid Capsuleers to join the mass test on Singularity's server. This is a continuation of our first mass test in June. Oh, shoot. I didn't realize that I was going to cover everything up. Where we premiered the new damage state visuals, primarily the new smoke and fire trails as ships enter hull damage. So you can see here, there's little smoke and fire on the different ships. Different size ships have different amounts of smoke and fire, and you can see it kind of leaves this fiery trail. You know what? And there's also little fire bobs. Oh my God, so great. One thing I will say about this is this smoke trail is so much better than any of the tech for the engine trails. Wait, except for this engine trail also arcs. Wait, hold on. So engine trails have always been really weird because they like turn with your ship sometimes, especially if your ship turns really quickly. So I wonder if if this is also like an improvement to that. Man, I don't like to tinfoil about this kinds of things because I'm always wrong when I'm trying to like read further into something than they've said. But between this and the picture from the Solar Festival, God, I hope they're working on custom ship trails, right? Like that. If they're not doing that, then I think it's a missed opportunity. But like they seem to be doing things at least around that. So yeah, either way. So why do another test? Hey, what's up, Jeff? This is actually the question I had, because when we did the live test last time, I thought it went pretty well. But they say, well, there are still a few kinks to work out. Some players experienced crashes in the previous mass test when warping. I didn't remember that. I do know that there was like sometimes it didn't show up right, but I didn't have any crashes. This mass test introduces a fix for that, which we hope to validate with your help. So there's information about how to get on the Singularity server, which usually you can just go into the launcher and switch it to Singularity. You'll need to download it. After the initial test, the server will remain open for an extended testing period over the weekend. So this is great. You know, Singularity used to be open all the time, and then they kind of controversially took down Singularity most of the time, largely because they were starting to do more and more like events and like live things and putting up like new sites and new short-lived challenges. And in order to keep that fair and fun, they had Singularity be offline, so that way people can't just test things without having any sort of consequences. But, you know, every once in a while, Singularity does come up, and it's a great time to play around with fits, to test out, like, we used to use Singularity a lot to, like, teach people how to use capitals correctly, because obviously capitals are one of those things that's, like, they play a lot differently than normal ships in several key ways. And it's one of those things that, like, they're very expensive. So you don't want to be making mistakes. So it's a good place. You know, Singularity is often a good place to train that. I know a lot of people have used it to practice Abyss. Yeah, Nico points out. It's a great place to experiment with Abyss fits because in Singularity, all of the major ships and all of the major modules, not all of the modules, but a lot of the major modules are seated on the markets for like 100 ISK each. So it's a really good place to just test out different fits and see what to do and have a little bit of fun. And so we'll have it all weekend, this weekend. So from the 24th of July through, I'm assuming the 28th, probably. Live testing a 20 billion setup is not fun. That's true. even after you've tested it on Singularity. It's a little bit nerve-wracking to do it on Tranquility. Yeah, so once again, tomorrow on the 24th of July from 1700 to 1900 UTC, I will almost certainly be streaming that. Should be able to stream that. So we'll probably be keeping a look at that. And it'll be in the FD Tech MLJ system. Once you get on Singularity, there are some like god powers that you can utilize using slash commands. You can just type in any chat / copy skills, I think it is, to make it so you copy over all your skills from Tranquility. But often when it comes to these kind of mass tests, they do mirror stuff right away or like right before it. So you should have everything that you have on Tranquility. And then, as Jeff points out, /MoveMe is used to move you to one of the several, like there's like a dozen almost or so systems that you can use the MoveMe command to. And FD Tech MLJ is one of those systems. It's the system that they most often use for mass tests. And there are seated stations in that system. So you just move yourself there and then go and dock up. Now, it's worth noting that Singularity is not an open PvP area. So if you're not told to do to PvP, and if it's not like consensual or whatever, like you're not supposed to, like, don't just sit there on the on dock and start messing with people before the live test happens. That makes them very grumpy. So just keep that in mind. We're there to test things, not to have emergent gameplay at the moment. That's what Tranquility's for. So in order to connect to Singularity, you change the server from Tranquility to Singularity in the top right corner of the launcher and log in as normal. Wait, hold on. When they say top right, they mean bottom right? Pretty sure they mean bottom right. There's a little thing that says right where it says the player count on the launcher. If you click on that, it should allow you to swap to Tranquility. If it doesn't, you can hit the gear, I think. Hold on. No. Okay, it used to be that you had to turn on Singularity sometimes, but I don't see that option anymore. You can move to the capitals. I went to Jita, bought expensive ships for 1 ISK each, and then sold it back to the market. And then you can buy a bunch of Plex and flood the account with SP from the Nest store. That's true too. Like, even if you don't have the skills or whatever, you could theoretically just go and like effectively generate a bunch of funny money on Singularity by those sorts of methods. And then you buy a bunch of skill injectors and inject it in, and then, you know, whatever, you're fine. Yeah, you should be able to just click at the bottom right for the different servers. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just glancing at things. Okay, so more detailed instructions are available here. This is the test server, Singularity, and others. See, this that does show it in the top right. That's weird. And then, yeah, this shows you, like, there's a list of player commands. So MoveMe can move you to any of these systems. Copy skills, like I said. And then boost sov and boost standings isn't going to be important for this. All right. So then you join the in-game channel mass testing, all one word, no space. And there'll be instructions in the MOTD. There's usually 2 different fleets available. You can just join either W or X, whichever one you want. And then follow the commands of your FC and things that are posted in mass testing. There's usually there's a second channel. I think it's in the MOTD of mass testing where you can like ask your questions and stuff too. And there's like lots of there'll be a lot of ISD and GMs and CCP guys there to help officiate things. You want to run it at the highest graphical settings your system is capable of. Large skill injectors will be placed on the market in FD Tech MLJ, so you can just inject yourself straight in FD Tech. And then update to the latest GPU drivers, because this is important, because like if there's a problem that emerges because your drivers aren't up to date, that isn't particularly useful to CCP. Like they'll want issues that they have, they'll want to be based on latest drivers. So, you know, just make sure that this is something that every gamer or everybody who with a computer with a decent graphics card should be doing on the regular, which is keeping your drivers up to date. And then there are no set release dates for Tranquility. I'm kind of sad because, like I said, when I saw this, I thought it was really, really good. So I thought we were pretty close to this being done. The fact that they're doing a second test means that it's obviously not as close as I wish it was. But at the same time, this means that we are getting closer. So probably something along the lines of like during the Legion major update, which should be coming in the next month or two. So these days, updating your GPU drivers all the time causes more problems than it solves. I mean, so it's always been true that when you update your drivers, you should like do a backup just in case to make sure, because like obviously an update can also introduce new regressions or problems, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But yeah, so we will be checking this out tomorrow, and this is mostly a visual update. I think it's really cool. We had a lot of fun with it. The firebobs are great. And this is kind of an enhancement of what they've done before, where like they're continually trying to make the game look better and look more realistic. You know, when I first started playing the game, missiles were a single ball that came out of your ship. Explosions were way more simple, and there was no like you couldn't visually see armor and shield damage in the way that you do now. Like all of these things over time they've added to the graphics engine, and this is just kind of the latest thing about it, where like when they did it last time, hull makes all of your lights and stuff flicker, but now with this, hull damage is going to make fire like blow out of some of the damage spots, which is pretty cool. Do they have like the previous dev blog about this? Nope, I don't see it. Oh well, that would have been nice. But yeah, this is just continued improvement, making things look cool. I am a big fan of the Bob. I hope there's a toggle for it. Of course there's I mean, it's a graphic setting. So yeah, it's going to be a graphic setting. Hold on, actually, now that I've said that, is engine trails in a graphic setting? Yeah, it is. See, look. So in the same way that like trails are right here and drone models are right here and explosions are right here, like it'll just be another extra one. By the way, Bobs are the little dudes that come and like check out your ship and stuff. I don't think it's gonna be here. They'll only be in player structures, I think. No, they show up in... Hold on. I think they do it during the cinematic reveal, usually. Nope. Not this one. Or not right now. Maybe if I dock, then they'll come and check me out. Yeah, I thought they did. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm trying to get them to show up, but I've been sitting here for a while. So, no, yeah. With the new fire system, if you dock while you're on fire, you can go watch the live stream or like the video where we did it on the previous playtest. But like when you dock up on fire, these little fire bobs come out and like spray you down and like put out the fire. It's pretty awesome. It'd be better if they made it so any fight over 100 players didn't have tie-dye. I've definitely been in fights with over 100 players without tie-dye. It really depends on where you are. Ah, there it is. Look, Bobs. See? So this is like a scanner Bob. So there's going to be a new one. I would say 1,000 players is probably where you start to hit tie-dye. honestly, I don't think players quite appreciate how amazing tie-dye actually is, like, as far as the technology goes. So if we see here, like, where is it? So these are the fire bobs. They're putting out the fire. That was the fire bobs. Without tie-dye, the servers tend to crash when you get 300 plus players. Well, I mean, I think that probably the server could do pretty good at bigger numbers now. Like 300 players was like back when tie-dye was first introduced, and the servers have gotten stronger and stronger over time. But, you know, the big thing is that, yeah, we can always bring more players, right? I wish they put these resources into less tie-dye. That's not possible. So the classic, they're not working on the same thing is absolutely true. The people that are working on things like the graphics rendering engine is not necessarily the people that are working on tie-dye. The key here is that tie-dye in particular is actually a server-side phenomena, right? So all this graphics rendering, all this like extra doodads, the skins, all that stuff, none of that really impacts tie-dye because none of that is part of the actual like gameplay simulation. Tie-dye happens because EVE Online takes place in a 1 second tick. So every single second, I like to say that, so EVE Online is a turn-based game where every second, like you get to take a turn, and if you do not take a turn within that second, you auto-pass at the end of that second. So every single second, it takes in all of the commands and all of the choices and all of the signals it's received from all of the clients, and it updates all of the states. You know, it calculates all of the shots, all of the movements, all of the physics, all of the whatever, and then distributes out all of that, the new state, to every single client that's attached to that server. And it does this every single second. So you're saying that all these graphics, et cetera, do not have a server load? Absolutely not. No. Because on a server level, it's all just data, right? Where you are, where you're headed, what your health is, et cetera, right? So when you like hit F1, you send a signal to the server that says, hey, I want to start shooting my gun. And that's your turn. That's your action for the turn, right? So then when it's processing all the stuff for the server, it says, okay, well, this gun is now firing. And, you know, it determines whether or not it hits and all that stuff. And then, like I said, it distributes out the state to all of the different clients. And then the next second, it does it again and again and again. Now, the fact that your ship is in hull is something that the server is monitoring and putting out there. Like the fact that you are at 98% hull with 0% armor and 0% shields, that is held on the server state, right? You just took damage. You're now at 98% hull. Sends that out to you. Your client receives that information and goes, okay, I'm at 98% hull. And your client says, okay, well, since I'm in hull, the graphics engine goes, we get to show off the fire stuff. And so your client adds the fire stuff and whatnot to your actual ship via the graphics engine. None of that happens on the server. The server only cares about the fact that you are at 98% hull. Does that make sense? A good example, a good way that you can actually tell this and like the difference between the disparity between your player or your client's experience and the server's experience is things like going into warp, right? Like if you're completely stationary, you are just a ball and a vector. So if you're completely stationary, you're technically pointed in every direction at the same time. So if you attempt to warp forward, your client, it makes sense. Your ship can move, right? And if you're trying to move, like if you start moving and then you click to move a different direction, your ship will slowly arc in that direction based on your agility. But if you're completely stopped and then you double click backwards, what happens? Your ship whips around super fast, faster than it possibly can, because the direction that your ship is pointing is actually something that the server doesn't really pay attention to. Your orientation as a ship actually exists on the client side, and the client is attempting to show you the current state in the most logical way possible. The most extreme version of this is like when you have capitals or freighters and you web them into warp, or even if you don't web them into warp, because the ship is attempting to align and it's like it thinks it's moving slowly, and you enter into warp, the server tells you that you're into warp, and now you're in warp like sideways, right? Because the server actually doesn't think of you as being sideways. They only think of you as going in that direction. It's the client that is now out of sync with your current state, and it's trying to get you there. It tries to fill in all of the different gaps. It's why, like, when you double click in space, it might take a little bit for it to actually like recognize it, because that's the difference between your client trying to show you something and the server's updates actually like validating that things are happening, right? So if your client locks up and slows down and is laggy, that could be caused by the fire or skins or whatever. But tie-dye specifically is only server calculations, because what happens is, like I said, it's every tick. So every tick, it has to do all of the calculations for that second. So the question then becomes, what happens when there are more, when the server takes more time or has more things to process than it can process in 1 second, right? So let's say, just for the sake of argument, the server can process 1,000 transactions a second. Now that is wildly low, okay? But I'm dumbing things down for our dumb human brains. Computers can process millions of transactions a second usually, right? But let's just say, for the sake of argument, it can process 1,000 transactions a second. And then suddenly, because there's a big fight going on, it now has 1,500 actions a second, or 1,100. Let's go with 1,100 actions per second, right? So now it can do 1,000. So at the end of that second, it's like because time flows independently of the server, right? Like time is not controlled by the server. So like a second will pass either way. And at the end of that second, the server will have processed 1,000 out of those 1,100 transactions. Now, transactions happen because when it receives instructions from the server or from a client or whatever, it puts it on a stack. Now, it's not just hitting people hitting F1 or whatever. It's other things too, like NPCs making decisions, drones doing things, et cetera, et cetera. Anything that's happening, it has a transaction in the server. So, you know, those numbers can go up pretty quick. So at the end of that second, it still has 100 transactions left in its buffer, which does two things. One, it makes it so that if it tries to distribute out the information to the clients, it's missing some, right? 1/10 of all of the transactions didn't successfully get processed. This causes things to fail. This causes modules to fail to turn off or on. Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm just going to finish this explanation just for the sake of it. So then, you know, another second passes and it gets another 1,100 transactions. And now it's at 200 transactions after it's done processing another 1,000. And this buffer is actually every single second getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that buffer exists in memory. And if you've probably heard of like a concept of like a memory leak, right? A memory leak is when something is stored in memory by a program and then it fails to clean it up after it's done with it, right? So like, let's say we have a routine that happens in a game or something like that, and it creates so many objects into memory in order to process its stuff, but then it doesn't delete those objects. They just kind of get lost into memory. That memory stays reserved with that information in it. And then when that transaction happens again, it doesn't go back to those memory spots. It creates all new memory spots. So every single time, it just keeps adding and adding and adding to the amount of memory it's consuming until the entire system fails and you run out of memory, right? That is what a memory leak is. So in this case, you actually don't have a memory leak because, you know, these transactions haven't been finalized yet. They're still living in memory, but it just stacks up further and further and further and further. So the server continues to become more and more problematic, not just non-responsive, but actually failing to process transactions in time, losing track of things, and losing track of state. And eventually the entire thing black screens because it doesn't get its proper updates. And eventually that memory fills up and the entire thing crashes, right? That was the experience of EVE Online prior to tie-dye. So what they've done is now they monitor, like the server monitors its own load, right? And once it realizes that it's going to start having a problem getting all of the transactions finished within a second, like let's say once it gets to about 70% load level, right? Then it goes, oh no, I am dangerously close to having a problem. Like if a fleet jumps in right now, jumping into a system is one of the heaviest transactions you can have. So like if a fleet jumps into the system, that's why like tie-dye will spike if somebody jumps in, like a fleet jumps into a system and then will like go back down. So, yeah, that's also true, Nyko. But so it goes, okay, well, like I am critically low on time, right? Like if too much more happens, I'm going to run out of my ability to do all of the transactions in a single second. So what it does is it extends the simulation's concept of a second beyond a second to give it enough time to process each second of simulation. And that is what we experience as tie-dye, right? So as more and more transactions come in, it gets to the point where maybe it takes 2 seconds to do all of the transactions for a second. That would be like 50% tie-dye, right? So on and so forth. So that's the point here, is that like tie-dye is effectively the server failing to keep up gracefully. So there are two ways for them to fix it. Well, there are a few ways for them to fix it. There are two significant ways. I'm sure if they rewrote EVE from scratch, they could do this all without compromises. No, because like no matter what, like I remember when what was it? It wasn't Ark. What was that game? New World, right? When New World came out, it was like Amazon's thing. So Amazon Web Services. God damn it. We're probably not going to get to armor tanking today, are we? That's fine. This conversation is great, too. So do you remember back in the day when games came out, day one, you just could not play them? Do you remember when Diablo 3, I think it was, first came out? It was just completely unplayable because of the fact that it had an online component. It was a big issue because like you couldn't even play it offline because it required you to be able to go online, and it just crushed the servers. And this was true about any successful online game, any MMO, especially expansion packs, etc., etc. On day one, things were awful. And the problem is that with all games, you know, every time that like a big popular game comes out, like within a month or so, they go, oh my God, it's fallen off 90% or whatever. Like this is a very common thing within games because the amount of server force, the amount of server power that it takes to process everything on day one, the number of players that are trying to connect on day one is not the same number of people on day 30, right? That people will stop playing for even the best of games, right? So as a company, as a game company that has a server-based infrastructure, the question then becomes, how do I have both the server power to handle day one and also the server power, like I don't expend too much. Like if I have enough server power to handle day one, I have wasted my money on every other day of that system's life cycle. And so if you've noticed, a lot of games actually have some pretty, like, launches have gotten a lot better recently. In the last 10, 15 years, game launches have become a hell of a lot smoother. And one of the things that have led to this is Amazon Web Services, right? So Amazon Web Services, it hosts almost 60% of the internet at this point. But it's not just Amazon Web Services anymore. Like, Microsoft has their own version, a few other people have their own version, but like Amazon was the first one to really do this, where you can host your stuff on their servers, and then they dynamically allocate more servers to the problem depending on load, and then remove them as they're not necessary, and then you only pay for the amount of server load that they end up using, right? So now I can have a game that is responsive on day 1 and is lean on day 30, right? And that has led to a lot of more successful launches, right? So Amazon then decided to try to like fix this problem, because this idea of like, well, when everybody gets together at once, servers creak and die, right? In a lot of these cases with games and stuff like Diablo 3, it's not like you have 100,000 people in a single game instance. Those servers were dying just managing logins and just managing basic authentications and matchmaking, right? An individual session will only have a controlled number of people in it. But and World of Warcraft is a great example, right? Where the way they handled things is that as you move within areas of World of Warcraft, you kind of move between server areas. And you may not even realize this is true, but a big example of this was like, I remember when the Encourage Gate opened up in World of Warcraft. And this is why a lot of times when it comes to MMOs now, if they're going to have like a live event, they tend to try to have it be distributed, right? Because as soon as you get everybody in one place, now you have a bottleneck, because there's only so much you can distribute when everybody's on the same server, right? Because like, here's the problem. If you, there's what's called a race condition, okay? In programming, we have what's called threads. So, you know, in a lot of places, there's going to be just like the main thread, right? And that's processing all of your graphics. It's processing all of your major stuff. Like when you write code and you just da-da-da-da-da, it's just all running on one main thread. And it just, even though the code, you can jump between things in code, as it's executing things, it is doing one transaction at a time and working its way through it on that thread. However, you can do what's called multi-threading, right? So like, I was an Android programmer for a while. Database transactions and internet transactions are very timely or time-costing transactions, right? A database takes a few microseconds for it to respond, or milliseconds sometimes, or even a second. And of course, internet servers have a tendency to take however long they fucking want. So if you like say, hey, get this information from this server, like if you do an API call in an Android app and you just put it on the normal main thread, the entire application locks up. You know, if you've ever seen an application stop responding, that's what's happened. There's some sort of process going on in the background that has now taken too much time, and that's happening on the same thread as the main UI. And so now the entire application can no longer respond. And Android works where if it's detected that an application hasn't responded to a UI action in 3 seconds, then it delivers a message to the user saying it's no longer responding and asks you if you want to close or wait, right? That's what's happening. And it used to be a lot worse because when you did Android programming, they let you do transactions like that on the main thread. Nowadays, actually, Android forces you to do those kinds of transactions on a separate thread. But so like what would happen is I want like, okay, so I'm going to do an internet transaction. I'm going to pull information from an API. I don't want to do it on the main thread. So I'm going to create a separate thread and I'm going to process it on that separate thread. And then so the CPU itself kind of treats those two threads as two totally different processes and kind of splits its time between those different processes. So that way your UI is still going to be responsive while this background process is still processing, right? The problem here is that these two threads, it's very difficult for them to communicate with each other because by definition, these two threads are asynchronous. So if I'm going to go collect data, now I can have, when that thread ends, it returns back to the main thread, and that can notify the main thread that something has been updated. And so now I can continue with what it has done. But let's say I am doing 10 different transactions, right? I'm pulling from 10 different API calls at the same time. Now, each of those API calls can report back to the main thread and update things. But no one of those threads will know if they are the last thread. Hey, what's up, container? In fact, none of the threads know the state of any of the other threads. The only thread that might know what the state of the other threads is the main thread, and that's only if the threads report back to it and it keeps track in its own way, right? So what this does is it leads to race conditions. Let's say we have two threads, right? Let's say we thread the combat simulation. So now each and every attack in the game is on its own thread. That should make it more responsive, potentially, right? But what happens if there's a thread where I shoot you and there's a thread where you shoot me, now which one of those two happen? So like you shoot me and kill me, right? Or I shoot you and kill you. Whichever of these two resolves first gets the kill and will invalidate the other one, right? So now it isn't a matter of like an actual simulation. It's a race between these two threads to figure out which one finishes first. That's why we call it a race condition. So my point is there's only so much you can do when it comes to making these things asynchronous. Could just make them go through. Yes. However, my point is that if they're both updating the same state, or better yet, here's a good one. Let's say this thread is saying I'm healing you for 20, and this one says I'm damaging you for 10, and you're at 10 health. Well, if this one finishes first, you die, and the healing fails. If this one finishes first, you heal for 20, and then this damages you for 10, and now you're at 10. So that's another example of where, like, that's an actual example of, like, where that would be a problem. And again, like, I'm trying to give, like, really simplistic versions of this stuff, so obviously this isn't necessarily the way it's actually going to happen, but, like, that's what a race condition is. The bottom line here is that a lot of processes have to be done synchronously. In other words, it has to be done, you know, one before the other, or at least this must complete before this can be done, right? So having things being processed on different servers is like the ultimate in asynchronous communication, right? Because like if this server is doing something and this server is doing something, the question then becomes, how much server processing are you going to expend to communicate these two servers' state? You're actually going to lose efficiency just trying to keep those two things working together if they're both interacting with the same thing. So things like the combat simulation isn't really something you can just, you can't just add more servers to a fleet fight and fix the problem. Thus, there are only two significant ways that CCP can do this. I mean, obviously, there's the normal ways that we know of where they remap things to make it so that, like, normally any given server blade has multiple systems mapped to it. But if they know that there's going to be a big fight, they'll actually remap everything off of that blade. So that way it's only working on that one simulation. So now we have the absolute highest amount of server power that we possibly can in processing that particular fight or system or whatever. Like, right? Like that's the most we can do. That's the most power we can do to it. The only other things that we can do is either A, upgrade the servers, which they do all the time. Their servers are ridiculously powerful. They've done many different dev blogs in the past about, every time they upgrade the servers, they post like dev blogs and stuff and show off like how like awesome their servers are. Like CCP servers are top of the line almost constantly. Okay. Like almost prototype level of top of the line. And secondly, what they do is they have worked to offload as many functions as they possibly can off of the main combat simulation. So in this sense, like the main combat simulation is closer to that main UI thread that I discussed earlier. And so anything that doesn't have to be on that server, they have now started to move off to other servers. So two good examples of this. You remember when they changed local or like chat, and now like chat every once in a while has problems? I mean, not necessarily, it doesn't have as many problems as it did before, but the reason why chat can go down without the game going down is that they've offloaded the chat system to a separate server, right? So that system, because of the fact that they're two different systems, occasionally that connection can fail. Either the server that's running the chat or whatever, or doesn't communicate correctly, blah, 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 blah. So there was some issues when it comes to that transition to using or offloading that chat server. But it meant that the main server, guinea pigs, like the stream for the guinea pigs, the main server no longer has to process chat information. Another good example of this was a project that they called Brain in a Box. So what they did was basically all of the state of like your attributes and, like your ship stats, like the actual, like, basically like your ship stats and like how your skills affect your ship stats, as well as things like boosts and stuff, like the actual like numbers behind the simulation. They've actually removed all of that from the main server and they've put it to its own system. So now there's an entire system that just maintains that state. And then the combat simulation can simply update and query that state whenever it needs to. So now that processing is not being done by the main server. So that's basically the only things that they can possibly do to make things better, is move things off of the main thread, off the main server calculations, which they continue to do, and improve the server architecture, which they continue to do. And of course, the third thing, B, make it so that the server fails gracefully, which is what tie-dye does. And then from there, of course, they're constantly hunting down inefficiencies within the code or, whatnot. There's plenty of stories of them finding things that are having problems, especially when, again, at those. One of the issues is that it's very, very difficult to simulate, to predict what actually happens at scale. Like, I remember when they created the thin client, which was like the very first things that allowed them to even test the server at scale. But I mean, like, this is why we're doing the mass test, right? Because in the end, they can test it as much as they want. But until we get 1,000 or whatever players connecting with all different kinds of machines, doing all different kinds of things that CCP may not even be able to predict off the top of their head, like, until we see that, then they have nothing to diagnose. And so they, every single fleet fight creates reams of logs, and every single fleet fight creates opportunities for them to improve things for the next time. And over time, things have gotten a lot better. I mean, every time they do bigger fights nowadays, I see people on Reddit complimenting how well things have performed. So one thing that they have difficulty with, they can't actually make the nodes smaller. If CCP could, they'd love to. Yes. Well, I mean, yeah. And that's the thing is that, like, the compromise is to restrict the number of people within the system. And that has its own problems. So how is it that we have less players than before? Servers have been updated and only do calls, and we still have tie-dye like we did 10 years ago. This makes no sense to me now. Because, first of all, whether or not we have more people than before, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. But remember, we're talking about apex situations, right? Like, our capacity to field thousands of players in the game has not gone down. We continue to break records, right? As the server becomes more powerful, more people are able to contribute. Like the other thing that has happened is, especially in nullsec, the power blocks have pooled further and further and further as time goes on. And so while the concurrent player base has not gone up, the number of people that are in a system during the big fights has gone up. And at the same time, again, those fights have improved. You know, the last several significant fights performed way better than any of the fights 10 years ago. I can tell you that. Because it doesn't matter how many people are there on average. It doesn't matter how many people are there across other systems. The only thing that matters is how many people are right there in that system doing stuff. And the player base has only gotten better at putting more people in a system to do stuff at the same time. Does that all track? Are we good? Hold on. Eve offline. So we can see here, like, this is 2015. Honestly, the number of people, the peak concurrent users hasn't actually gone down that much compared to 2015. Now, obviously, there was a bit of a dark time where we had blackout and scarcity and all that stuff. But, you know, the numbers are actually not that bad. Like, we are currently in the summer, which always has a tendency to go down a little bit. But again, so like, sorry for derailing the stream. I don't think that this is I mean, this is what we're here for, right? I'm here to put Eve into context for my fellow Empyreans. So if today we're talking about server architecture, then that's amazing. One thing that they could do is create a mechanic where multiple objectives need to be met at the same time in separate systems. Jeff, it's almost like you've stumbled upon the theory behind this, the sovereignty overhaul from Aegis-Sov. Like, that is exactly what Aegis-Sov was like designed to do, was to break up those fights across multiple systems. Now, you still have Apex fights around structures, but yeah, like, that's one of the reasons why, I mean, like, Fozzie's, like, they wanted to break it up across the entire constellation instead of a single system, not just for server load, but also for strategy-wise, right? Like, if everything's just an Apex fight, then now the guy who can drop the most Titans just wins all the time. And Fozzie-Sov was designed to make it so that it was more about flexibility and control over the space than the ability to just put a bunch of people on grid. But yeah, I mean, like, a big part of that was about server architecture considerations. Absolutely. Yeah, the big fights aren't about flipping a system. It's about removing a structure. That's absolutely correctly. Do they actually have to be completed simultaneously? Yes and no. So they appear throughout the constellation, and you have to be, they have a timer on them. So it's a lot like faction warfare, where there's like plexes across the place, and, you know, each one has to entosis it. So you will often be entosising across multiple systems at the same time. Yeah. Especially if you want to get it done in time. Or, you know, like, anyone that you're not controlling means that your enemy can be controlling it, right? Like, that's the whole theory. Cool. All right. Well, I hope this was useful to people. I'm going to jot this down because I think that this was great. We will probably be doing tanking another time just because of this, but, like, This was a good discussion. I appreciate you guys talking about it. Any other questions about it or whatever? That'd be great. Because despite SOV being decentralized, citadels are incredibly centralized compared to posses. Well, I mean, posses are the same way too, but I mean, like, the whole point is that, like, there are still Apex level fights, but, you know, there has been work in the past, a la Age of SOV, to make it so that it's not just about Apex fights. Questions, comments, concerns? Not really. You'd run into problems trying to have 100 Titans in a pos bubble. I mean, okay, fair. Okay, fair. Fair. Yes. Structures provide a larger zone of security than posses ever did. One thing they could do to break up the system node is to put planets in their own node and have an acceleration gate in high altitude that brings you down to low altitude. So you could do that. However, so like if you split it so that way it wasn't just a server, like a server wasn't just the system, it was also, or it was down to like a grid level granularity, that could work. However, two things. One, that doesn't actually fix the problem once everybody is on grid with each other. And two, you actually, remember I told you that the single largest load on the server is transferring from one server to the other, because basically server A has to transmit all of the state to server B, and then server B has to kind of use that state to construct its own model of what's coming in and then add it to the simulation, right? So you're only going to have that happening more. And it's going to make it so that, like, imagine if warping onto grid, like when you jump between systems, it can take different amounts of time. Like when you're in that warp tunnel, that's basically trying to cover for a load window. Imagine if that was happening every single time you warp. Now, when you warp in, there is sometimes a hitch, but that is almost always client side. That's your client attempting to construct everything in space to visualize it to you, not the server. That would make it into a server problem, as every single time you move between grids, they have to transmit your data from one server to another, which again, the servers are not able to be synchronous with each other necessarily, so they just have to always be ready to receive information from another server and add it to its own personal simulation. So you don't actually fix any problems, and you might make them worse. Yeah, I wouldn't make it so each grid was its own server, just thinking putting planets on its own servers. I mean, Vanguard. No. I mean, so back to what I was saying earlier, by the way, was that Amazon, like, wanted to make their own MMO that was this kind of infinite, like they bragged about this idea of like infinite scalability. And while it changed over time, that game, New World, was kind of the eventual end result of that effort. And as anyone who knows anything about it knows, New World was a giant mess, especially when it first came out, but also completely failed to deliver on that promise, right? So even the best, the people with all the money and all the knowledge about server architecture failed to make this idea of like a scaling server that can handle any number of clients connected to the same point, right? CCP did hire some Star Citizen server meshing techs, by the way. Yeah, and a lot, I mean, like, that's, like, there's a lot going on, including, like, the dynamic server remapping and stuff like that. And things like Brain in the Box, right? Because if you think about it, Brain in a Box is a kind of server meshing, because you still have two servers. You now have the server that's managing, like, statistical state, like, the attributes And then you have the server that's handling the current live combat simulation. And those communicate with each other, as opposed to before where they were both handled on one server. Hold on. See if I can pull that up real quick. No! All right. I'm guessing this one also won't work. No! Okay. Hold on. Man, the day that we lose Wayback Machine is the end of civilization as we know it. Damn it. Nope. It doesn't have it, though. That's too bad. Yeah, that's not going to do it. This isn't going to do it. Wait. There it is. Digital rot is a serious issue. All right, well, link rot. So, yeah, I can't look it up, but maybe... Oh, hold on. No. Yeah, Dogma is the system that manages all of the attributes. Oh, well. The point of the matter is that this happened in 2015. It was a very big deal at the time. And it also was buggy as hell. It was a hard transition, let me tell you. But, so yeah, I guess that's a little bit of information about kind of what's server side, what's client side, how these things interact with each other, and why fire and smoke is not causing tie-dye. Funny enough, so like a good example of this was the bounty system actually got accused of causing tie-dye. And even though CCP said that it wasn't, like they looked into it and it wasn't causing significant tie-dye, or like it wasn't causing significant server load, they did remove bounties because people believed that it was causing server performance issues. So that's true. All right, so let's see. That's going to be a good segment. Let's go ahead and jump into Interbus reincorporates under new company Evermore. All right. Anything else we want to, like one last chance, anything about this topic before I do the New Eden news? Because that's going to also be its own separate thing. So I kind of want to... I think we're good. All right. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtrothi, the voice of New Eden, and this is your New Eden news for... Wrong one. Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtrothi, the voice of New Eden, and this is your New Eden news for July 22nd. YC127 Solarfest celebrates interstellar success. Beautiful Nightmares Solarfest creativity unleashed. Paragon has hosted an exhibition of ship skins created by independent artists to mark the first ever Solarfest. These artistic efforts were just one part of Paragon's Interstellar Arts Festival, a celebration of creativity in New Eden dedicated to Paragon artistic platform Skinner. Pilots took to the skies in Nightmare-class ships recoded in glorious colors. Their new skins were made to be noted by noted capsuleer designers Alex Tau, Kradric Khan, Sven Bear, Tyre Reyes, and Zoe Kazar. A product of Saunchus Nation, the sight of a nightmare is normally an omen of great fear and horror in New Eden, but these battleships had been reclaimed as beautiful expressions of their artists' talent. The pilots roamed all across Nullsec, beginning in Quirius, where they were destroyed in an engagement with the Residence Alliance-only fleets. Returning in fresh clones, they headed north to, I'm going to guess, Vale of the Silent and Tribute, where they fought in a protracted skirmish against local Capsuleers. After that, they headed west to fight the Initiative in Fountain, and then finally east to Ethereum Reach, where Pandemic Horde made quick work of their artistic flyers. Watch Galnet's broadcast for full coverage of this event. Interplanetary Festival, largest in history. While these beautiful ships engaged amongst the stars, planetary colonies across the cluster hosted musical concerts, engineering showcases, and artistic exhibitions. With events taking place on hundreds of planets, Solarfest is New Eden's largest ever festival. On Amar, Paragon's Iris welcomed to the stage acclaimed soloist Amayan Jural and Louis Kiel. The two were reunited with composer Kitian Maratak for the first time since their legendary performance of the Sarum Symphony 15 years ago. They performed Maratak's latest composition, Spectrum Dawn, written for the festival. This sweeping epic honors the many stars that make up the Amarian Empire. On a shielded platform amongst the clouds of the storm planet on Tio Nuswedi 2, I didn't realize there was going to be so many hard words in this. Rusti troops convened for a 3-day dance competition. Held in partnership with the Verukyor tribe, the Solar Sail Dance Championship hosted over 1,000 dancers from every tribe of the Republic. Iris opened the ceremony with a speech dedicated to the history of the art form, quashing false rumors that the poet Crofton had refused to participate in the event. On Caldari Prime, a joint Caldari Galente peace concert was opened by dueling Surakio players. The concert celebrated the joint history of the Luminaire solar system with artists from both the planet's major cultures. Iris joined the players, displaying her own technical brilliance on the Suraiko to the crowd's amazement. Is that two different Yep, that's two different spellings of the same thing. Got it. While there are too many events to mention by name, Paragon's Iris told media outlets at the company's headquarters in Orife that she was, quote, proud to be part of a corporation that is so dedicated to artists from so many worlds, end quote. Disclosure. The above article was adapted from a press release by Interplanetary Media Network, an Evermore company. News in brief. Minmatar scientists published paper on tachyon dating that promises to unlock new artifact aging techniques. Wildfires in Eneleti Plains Nature Reserve on Matar threatens endangered species. Renowned cyberneticist Dr. Huang Rufaldo wins prestigious Yinmei Science Award for work with Upwell Consortium. Petition to investigate Vapor Seas technologies for illegal technology sourcing dismissed due to lack of evidence. And President Agard's chief of staff resigns ahead of the Race for the Hive's inquest publication. And that is your New Eden news for July 22nd, YC127. Now for some analysis. And boy, are there things to talk about here. So a few things to note. First of all, Solarfest is new this year, right? Solarfest was a thing, like it was a login event. It was 7 days as of this recording last week, where they introduced like a bunch of new skins, and there was some Skinner parts, and there's Skinner parts in the login reward track. It was the first login reward track that was like you had to log in literally every single day of the week in order to get the good prizes, which I kind of frowned on before. But there was also Skinner components for sale in the Skinner area, and also like sales on the actual like publishing of skins. But I didn't remember, I didn't hear anything about this whole nightmare thing ahead of time. So I assume this was just something I missed out on. You know, these are actual players, which I think I've seen at least some of these names in the Skinner like market before. So that tracks. And we probably can, these are probably good examples of their work. Now, Paragon and Evermore are organizations that are part of what was like, so Interbus was a division of Concord, right? Where, so like Concord is effectively like the UN of EVE Online, where it's kind of, the Concord's function is to provide universal support for all 5, but now 4 of the major empires. So I'm getting into that, Malin. So like, for instance, one of their biggest jobs is to try to attempt to maintain peace between the 4 different empires. That's one of its biggest things. But they do other things too, like monitor piracy with the Defense Enforcement Department. And also, you know, police us as Capsuleers, because Capsuleers are independent of any given empire. And so they need a body that is independent of the 4 empires, but still like attached to the 4 empires in order to provide that service. Right. They also do things like maintain the fluid router, and they are the SCC, the Secure Commerce Commission, that mandate and regulate trade throughout the cluster. So that way, you know, you can sell something in Jita the same way that you can sell it in Amar, right? And they follow the same rules with the same taxes, more or less, you know, whatever, right? So that's all. That's what Concord does. And one of the Concord services was Interbus, which handles like a lot of the transportation and logistics within New Eden for the main empires. Yeah, Concord's not that effective. But during the crises that led up to Uprising, so we had like the Amar put up the stellar transmuters in Turner, Vard, and Egmar, and we had the Edencom structure that decloaked in Othanoon. Right? Both of these kind of created flashpoints of tension between the empires that are already in conflict with each other, right? Like Othanoon was a flashpoint for the Glente and Kaldari, and the Stellar Transmuters was a flashpoint for the Mimitar and the Amar. And notably, the Amar actually attempted to subvert Interbus's ability to help the evacuation process when it became increasingly clear that the Turner Stellar Transmuter was going to become destabilized, that the star itself was becoming destabilized. And during this crisis, during this consternation, I think it was right before Turner exploded, the head of Interbus, while attending like at night, but like during the meetings about Interbus and its relationship when it comes to the Amar and the Mimitar and Turner, suffered a fatal heart attack and was quickly replaced by Alexander Ducassi, who is now the head of Interbus. But within a couple of days, he restructured Interbus as a private corporation, renamed it Paragon, and created a partner, or not a partner, but like an umbrella organization called Evermore above that, right? And so not only was all of Interbus kind of folded into this network, but also Interbus... wait, no, I'm sorry, other way around. Interbus is... So Interbus becomes Evermore, and Paragon, like Evermore is under Paragon, right? So here we go. This is from 2022, which is YC124.07.23. We see Orphe Genesis. Interbus has announced today that they are incorporating under a new parent company, Evermore, just days after the death of Interbus's former CEO, Hakaka Peruka. A newly appointed CEO, Alexander Ducassi, has announced the extensive restructuring of the corporation. Interbus was founded by the Amar Empire, Kaldari State, Glente Federation, Mimitar Republic to ensure open transportation of goods and people throughout the cluster. Under this new structure, Evermore, a privately controlled entity, will become the majority owner of the formerly government-controlled corporation. Interbus has been experiencing a deadlock since representatives of the founding empires were unable to reach an agreement on the operational future of the company. Following rising militia conflict and the controversial activation of prototype stellar transmuters by the MR Empire, the restructuring of Interbus under Evermore will end that deadlock as Interbus becomes a private public concern. Representatives of all four empires welcome the restructuring deal in a joint announcement today, blah, 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 blah. But then it also says here, Evermore expands with corporate acquisitions and the founding of new companies. So Orified Genesis. It is also announced today that Evermore's expanded operations will include the acquisition of a number of corporations across New Eden. Interzone Shipping, Zero-G Research, Adaptive Provisioning, Valor SecOps, and the legendary Cremo Inc. Cloning Corporation are all slated to become Evermore's companies upon completion of financing agreements. The acquisition of these companies have been confirmed by their executive boards and will be finalized in approximately a month's time. But then it also says, in addition to purchasing these existing companies, Evermore is founding a host of new corporations. Verity Enhancements, an augmentation manufacturer of the average New Eden citizen. Vapor Seas Technologies, a cloud-based computing company, and the Interplanetary Media Network, a cluster-wide network of planetary news and entertainment media outlets. So, and just so you guys know, like the short of these sites here, I've talked about these in other videos, but like these are all, the short of it is that Evermore now has the ability to build infrastructure in space, deploy clone soldiers, and as well as like transportation and security, right? As well as these augmentations, communications, and cloud-based computing. So if we go back to the news, though, we see a couple of those names show up, right? So if we go down here, we see disclosure. The above article was adapted from a press release by the Interplanetary Media Network, an Evermore company. So this entire post, including its claims about it being the largest ever festival and all that stuff, is by the very company that is like bragging, right? Like they own the media network. So keep that in mind. Now, while it wasn't a big deal to us, what they're trying to argue is that Evermore basically sponsored, yes, this then is basically just Paragon propaganda, true. So what they've done is, the other piece to Paragon is the construction of Iris. So in Eve, there's a lot of like restrictions and like considerations when it comes to artificial intelligence for various reasons. The biggest one being the mistake that led to the creation of the rogue drones. So one of the things that Concord actually does is regulate AI, like how strong of an AI you're allowed to have. And over time, especially recently, that control has kind of frayed. And Iris exists as one of those like top examples of this, because Iris is an artificial entity. She's an artificial intelligence, but they have embodied her. She has a physical body, but she's actually got 8 copies of her physical body to run all 8 of the Paragon stations throughout New Eden. So like in all of the major empires and a few other places, they've got Paragon stations. So Evermore, who is part of Paragon, which are, of course, the people who made Skinner, have put a ton of money into this big celebration. And, you know, there's all this stuff about Iris being here and Iris being there. This is a huge flex of the power and capability of Evermore and Paragon. Like it can be read as that. So, you know, it could very well be that it was the largest ever festival. You know, you could say technically speaking, because they made sure it was coordinated on more planets than any organization ever could have up until this point, because most organizations are bound to one empire and Paragon is explicitly not. So, yeah, who says you can't be everywhere all at the same time? Exactly. So that's very interesting. It is going to be worth paying attention to where this comes out. I've looked up several of these names and stuff. Many of them, I don't have any previous... I didn't look up these guys, though. Hold on. I was looking up if there's any previous examples of these people. Oh, yeah, here we go. So here we go. Sorum Symphony, A Glorious Triumph. So this is from 2010, YC127.07.23. Mechios, which is Sorum Prime. Mechios is the planet where Jamil Sorum was born, and is where the Mechios graveyard, which is where Jamil Sorum used the super weapon to destroy the Elder Fleet. All right, Mechios, from the hushed and pensive opening notes to the stirring triumphant finale, Katian Maritak choral Sorum Symphony held listeners entranced for the entirety of its 3-hour length. Quote, I wanted to express the Empress's rise to power and the journey of her lifetime to make the audience feel her experience. End quote. They're talking about Jamil. The honored composer stated later that in an open interview, home viewers may not have received as powerful of an experience as the attendees, but the program has been recorded to produce the closest possible facsimile and will be available next month for purchase. Featuring a vocal talents of soloist Amian Giral and Lowy Kill, the symphony presented an immersive experience incorporating subtle lighting and enhancing moods and utilizing their fullest extent the unusual acoustical properties of Saint Nairon's Basilica. The extensive 12th movement, expressing the climactic battle above Mechios, has already been called a marvel of precision composition, with singers representing both the Sorum fleet and the Mimitar Elder fleet passing around and amongst the audience in recreation of the chaos and unpredictability of the fight, and culminating with the Elder fleet singers faltering and scattering from the Sorum singers' concentrated sound. Members of the audience flinched from their blinding golden light when it was projected from behind soloist Kill, filling the grand nave with radiance, recalling the Empress's finishing blow to the Elder Fleet Titan. Impressions above the audience, or impressions from the audience, has ranged from moving to breathtaking. Privy Council member Arim Mekshalad enthused, quote, I have never experienced something so powerful. The 5 minutes of total darkness with the single soloist Giral representing Jamil's lost years was especially poignant, end quote. No reaction has yet been issued by the Empress, though she and her retinue were in attendance in full formal regalia. Composer Maritak appeared unconcerned by the lack of comment. Quote, the symphony was written of her, but not for her. She was there. She does not need to experience it the way her people do, added Maritak. This is a story of a remarkable woman who has had the Lord's hand upon her shoulder, and we must all remember that. So that is kind of what they're referring to here when they're talking about the nope, that's not it. When they're talking here about the Amar Prime and these different singers and all that stuff, this is the previous event that they are referring to, and it's Maritak's latest composition, so it's the same singers and the same composer. I don't know if that's interesting or not, whatever. Now, a couple other things. Back to the, I think that might be all I've got for the actual, articles. But in the news in brief, we have a couple interesting things. So the Mimitar, a few years back, there was a couple of interesting developments when it came to archaeology, right? The Mimitar discovered a bunch of, really ancient stuff, which is important to the Mimitar because a lot of the Mimitar's culture and history has been destroyed by the Amar and other things. So they have, in the background, been doing this, archaeological study and all that stuff. So this could theoretically, call back to that and possibly allow, bring us back to that and kind of get some sort of resolution to those things. I would need to look up exactly when those happened, but I thought it was 2021-ish time period we saw that. But then around the same time, we also saw the Kaldari doing some archaeological stuff around Calichiota peaks that didn't quite get resolved either. But, a lot of this stuff that's been going on is about rediscovering the past. So I would not be surprised if this didn't eventually become part of a bigger thing, but we're just going to have to keep an eye on it for now. Now, the Enaleti Plains is actually a big piece of Matar. We see here, where is it? Yeah, the Enaleti Plains on this continent are the ancestral lands of the Starkmenir tribe. The Verrocchio tribe ancestral lands are also on Croatia in the greater Sabaki Desert, north of the Sabaki Sands. The Great Caravanserai is located at the edge of the plains in the lee of some rocky hills close to the greater Sabaki Desert. So this plains is the ancestral lands of the Starkmenir, which the Starkmenir are the tribe of the Mimitar that got lost. And actually that Elder Fleet, which got referenced in earlier, one of the primary functions of the Elder Fleet during the Empyrean Age events was to rediscover and rescue the Starkmenir tribe. So, you know, the I think it was the Nephintar. A lot of them defected to Amar and became the Amatar, and they were always kind of hated as traitors. But then during the events of the Empyrean Age, it was kind of revealed that one of the reasons why they did that was they were secretly hiding the Starkmenir, and there were some remaining Starkmenir. And so a big thread of the Empyrean Age events was the attempt to rediscover and rescue the Starkmenir. So I say all this to say that the Mimitar, more than almost any other race, works in symbols and omens and portents. And so I think that it's interesting, it feels strangely paralleled that there would be a wildfire in the area of Starkmenir that threatens the endangered species. Another endangered species would be the Starkmenir themselves. So if I was to be a Verrocchio prophetess or something like that, I could potentially see this as an ill omen for the future of the Starkmenir and the Mimitar. But again, we're going to have to keep an eye on it to see whether or not that's where they're going with it, or if it's just a throwaway thing. So then, renowned cyberneticist wins a prestigious Yinmei Science Award for work with Upwell Consortium. So the Yinmei, obviously one of the Galente groups, they're the caste-based system. I believe I think the current president is Yinmei, if I remember correctly. But Upwell Consortium, their big thing right now is the Vanguard stuff, right? Upwell has been kind of the leading competition against the Deathless's Vanguard. You know, while the SOCT, yeah, she's been Yinmei, yeah. So, you know, the SOCT are kind of the group that has been the most vocal against the Deathless as an entity, as a person, and as in his circle. But as far as actually fighting the Deathless on the ground and in the sky, it's basically just been Upwell, right? It's Upwell's systems that the Deathless has hacked with mercenary dens. It's Upwell's systems that the Deathless has attacked and whatnot on the ground in various Vanguard scenarios. It was Upwell's response to the Vanguard has been to increase their cloning capacities and creating their own clone soldiers and their own new line of transportation ships in direct response to the threat that the Vanguard and the Deathless has presented. And of course, you know, when pro-Deathless forces do their incursions, it is the Mortis Legion, which is the military arm, effectively, of Upwell, that defends those areas, that functions as kind of the counterinsurgency. So I think this is just a small tidbit of that march towards Vanguard. Because remember, so in another month, somewhere between about 2 to 3 months, we're going to get the next major Vanguard playtest. And by that time, if not next summer, we will transition to the idea of bastions existing, which, you know, right now, all of the Vanguard as we know them exist in the virtuality in in the Fulcrum in Zarzak, and then project out of there. But the idea with Bastions is that we'll be able to have, NPC groups and then eventually player groups will be able to have their own virtualities and therefore their own kind of branch of Vanguard independent of the Fulcrum. So something has to happen between now and then for groups like the SOE to have access to these Vanguard technologies enough to make these Bastions. So chances are this is a small piece of that, I would say. Then this idea of Vapor Sea Technologies, which is their cloud computing, I tried to look up whether or not there's any history behind this investigation. I couldn't find anything. This does say it's dismissed due to lack of evidence. The only thing I'm going to say about this is that ever since Evermore, first of all, Evermore, as I presented earlier, kind of was formed under extremely shady circumstances. But beyond all of that, Evermore seems incredibly, incredibly effective legally. They seem to never lose when it comes to legality or Concord ruling or anything like that, which of course Interbus used to be part of Concord, but yeah. And of course a cloud computing technology could very well be another piece of the Vanguard solution. So I think it'll be the wormhole groups that get Bastions first. Maybe. It could be. I feel like those are slightly separate, but possibly related things. Well, they have said that NPCs are going to get the Bastions first. And then I think that it was, I'm pretty sure if I understood it correctly, like this next playtest that's happening, I think October, is going to be mostly NPC Bastions. And then by next summer, they're hoping to be able to have player run Bastions. And in the example, they showed SOE, and I thought they showed one other, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah, so this idea of cloud computing and Vapor Seas technologies and all that stuff could very well be another piece to this. I think that one of the things that's questionable about this is illegal technology sourcing, right? Like this whole drifter crisis and everything that's been going on has caused massive amounts of new technology and new revelations and new discoveries of ancient Jovian tech, sleeper tech, drifter tech, deathless tech, has kind of exploded into the world. And so the question then becomes, is this accusation true? And what illegal technology sourcing may they have done? And we don't know yet, but this is directly connected to Paragon and Evermore and all that stuff, which, by the way, Evermore is like, keep Evermore and Evermore and Upwell are separate entities. They both are kind of connected through Concord, where Edencom and Paragon, Edencom and Upwell are tightly intermeshed, right? Upwell created the Edencom ships, and Edencom and Upwell have worked very closely together throughout this whole process, for many years now. And then, of course, Evermore is connected to Concord through its previous existence as Interbus. So, we could definitely make one of them, crazy conspiracy boards and tie lines between them. But Evermore and Upwell are two separate organizations, along with other organizations like AIR, right? Which again has not been mentioned here, but oddly enough is still quiet in the background. So a lot of things to pay attention to. And of course, President Agard's chief of staff resigns ahead of Race for the Hive's inquest publication. This is, at least to a lot of people that have read this, according to people that talk to me, isn't AIR somehow linked to the SOE? Yes, one of the two founders of AIR is a former SOE. And there are some suggestions that that former status is extremely loose. Yes. It is not unreasonable to suggest that, especially after the debacle with Project Discovery and the Ascension project, where SOE did research on drifter tissue in order to create alpha clones, like that whole debacle and how it came out. I think that was kind of the impetus to split off that kind of sense into its own deniable organization, which would then become Air, right? But that's neither here nor there. So this last one is the meat for the base, as it were. So I've talked about this many times before, but like the Gallente have had a pretty rough go of it for the last several years. The player, like the Caldari militia in particular, are incredibly effective and loyal. And so everything from the Othanoon fights and the Stargate construction to the invention of the stellar transmuters, all the way up to the race for the hives, the Gallente have very much been like basically the furthest behind of the four empires when it comes to getting things done. And this has all been under Celis Agard's watch, right? So Celis Agard was elected, I think in 2020. So after Ronan decided not to run again, Celis Agard first ran, I think 10 years before that, but she finally was successful. She was extremely shrewd towards the beginning, but then she was, she kind of overplayed her hand during Uprising when they seized control over Intaki. Intaki was under the Militia War Powers Act, where it was in faction warfare space to be controlled by whichever empire happens to own it based on player conflict, or, a Capsuleer conflict, Empyrean conflict. But this has led to Intaki flipping over and over again and causing all kinds of problems with Intaki. So eventually, as trade negotiations or peace negotiations over Intaki kind of collapsed, President Agard made the choice to send the Navy in and seize control over Intaki, and it's become the headquarters of the Gallente militia. This is seen as extraordinarily controversial and imperialistic, and was a big impetus to why there's been kind of a restructuring of the alliances and agreements between the different empires, ending the alliance between the Gallente and the Mimitar, along with the alliance between the Amar and the Caldari. So, Celis Agard is in a very weak position, and the elections were supposed to be in February. But late last year, the drifters began to attack. Now, this has largely been blamed on the Deathless and his continued experimentation in Zarzak with the Fulcrum and now what was revealed after the initial drifter attack on the Zarzak, the Warden, which are these powerful ancient Jovian technology that he's now leveraging in order to expand his power base and create his vanguard. But this has led, this has been in tandem to increased activity with the drifters' conflict against the Triglavians in the Abyss, and then that spills out into full-scale invasion at the beginning of this year. And the Gallente, Celis Agard, postponed the elections until after the Drifter Crisis. And once again, during the Drifter Crisis, there was what was called the Race for the Hives, where different people could participate in anti-drifter operations for one of, I think it was 9-10 different organizations, including the four major empires. And the Gallente was the only major empire to fail to be one of the top 5 to eventually seize control over one of the drifter hives. So the Caldari, the Amar, the Mimitar, the Caldari, and the Triglavian collective have all successfully... Wait, hold on. The Amar, the Mimitar, the Caldari, Edencom, and the Triglavian collective have all successfully seized one of the 5 drifter wormholes, where they have moved this strange piece of drifter technology where, so since the drifter holes had existed, there were these pickup sticks, like these fragments of something in the heart of the hive. During the Drifter crisis, these aligned into a giant tube, and towards the end of the crisis, you could see a wormhole that appears to go to Jovian space at the top of the tube. These tubes have been turned off. You can no longer see the wormhole there, but they have been moved to those different, like to the headquarters. Each of those controlling empires have a headquarters location in their respective wormhole. And so that device has been moved there. And there's a lot of questions, like the big next thing that everybody's wondering about is like, what are these empires going to do with this new technology? What is this new technology going to open for them? Are we going to be able to get to Jovian space, et cetera, et cetera? The Gallente were shut out in all of this. They're the only major empire that do not have a drifter wormhole. And so this was just another problem on a pile of problems for Celes Agard. And even though the drifter crisis has now ended, the Gallente have failed to hold elections, citing nebulous reasons by Celes Agard and kind of keeping the Navy on high alert. You know, if we're always at war, we can't have elections right now. So, you know, as time goes on, we're now in July. We're now 5 months past when elections were supposed to be, at least 3 months, I think, since the end of the Drifter crisis. And we have no elections in sight. And so that's all why this one note is so juicy. Because, you know, the chief of staff of President... So, like, there has been this race for the Hive's inquest being, like, worked on. And this was kind of, like, it's supposed to explain the failings of the Federation's administration in, you know, succeeding in their technology, you know, in their efforts. But having the chief of staff resigning right ahead of its publication is incredibly sus. And yet we still don't have elections. So does this mean we're going to have a Gallente civil war? I don't even know what that looks like, to be honest. You know, they have set up things like an Amar civil war. They've set up things like the Caldari, like a conflict between the different Caldari, not mega corporations, but their new conglomerates, you know, the forest faction and the mountain faction and all that stuff. But as much as they've set them up, like, it's, in order for these kinds of things to happen, it has to, like, be a meaningful thing in game, or like what does it even mean to have the Gallente at civil war? I don't know. And I don't know if CCP knows. It could be leading towards that. I think that, and I've said this before, I think that the Gallente elections, or lack thereof, is going to be the next significant flashpoint after the Drifter crisis that kind of leads us to things like Bastions and all of the other pieces that we're kind of heading towards with the introduction of Vanguard, et cetera, et cetera. So I wonder if the factions will test the Drifter tubes and we'll get a second Turner-like event. I don't think the Drifter tubes would do anything close to like a Turner event. That's a totally different thing. The question is, what are they going to do when they get access to Jovian space? That's what I would say. Just ignore the fact that the last presidential election was during the Trig invasions. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. They managed to do the previous presidential elections during the middle of a Triglavian invasion, amidst assassination attempts, you know, and disruption. You know, that only delayed the election by, like, I think a couple months. It is also worth noting that, yeah, so Celes Agard was literally assassinated and then 2 months later became president of the Federation. Now, she, of course, had a backup clone, but it is pretty suspicious that she died right before becoming elected. Especially since, you know, Jamil dying before becoming Empress was the source of the other's influence in her head. So there's a lot to keep an eye on. All right, well, I think that is it for today's New Eden News on July 22nd, YC127. Obviously, it's very, very exciting, and there's a lot to go on. Maybe we'll be looking at this video, or at least back at this post in the future and being like, oh, that's what that is. But I'm glad to see more New Eden news and things happening in game, and we will continue to be watching for that election. But until next time, if you're watching this live, hang tight. If not, then I've been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for coming, hanging out, watching the video. If you're watching, let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think is coming? Is there a civil war coming? Do you think that Celis Agard should remain president of the Federation? Do you think that this wildfire is an ill omen? All this and more, let me know in the comments down below. But make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because all of that is very, very helpful to the channel. And it's how we get this information out there and maximize players' knowledge and literacy of EVE Online, because a better player base makes a better EVE Online. And I've been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. Until next time, I'll see you in space. Woo! All right. Cool. Man, guys, I'm so sorry. It's already been 2 hours. It's now 2 o'clock this time. And we haven't even started the tanking guide. I'm going to ask, please do not make me sit here for like another 2 or 3 hours to start a whole nother thing. I think that today's stream was important, and so we'll try again. I don't know if it's tomorrow or not. I know I can't stream. I'm probably not going to be able to stream on Friday. What do I have things better? I got a dog to walk. I got food to make. Yeah, so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do it tomorrow. I'll try. It depends on how things work. I know it's not going to be Friday. Yeah. But yeah. Anything else that we definitely want to talk? Oh, we will be. Oh, no. Tomorrow we have the live test. We have the. So depending on how that goes, that'll be early. So there's a reasonably good chance that I could do the tanking guide tomorrow. I don't know. If you want to stay up to date or influence my decisions about whether or not I stream and what I stream, please go ahead and join our Discord. Link is right there. You don't have to join the convocation if you don't want to. You can just join the Discord and hang out. But the Convocation of Empyreans is recruiting. We're here to maximize player engagement with EVE Online. We're here to help you. We do weekly events and fleets, including mining fleets, PvP, faction warfare fleets, etc., etc. And if you are returning to EVE or new to EVE or just never used a buddy code before, make sure to use the link down below or in the chat right now. You get 1 million free skill points, and it helps support those who make this channel and the convocation possible. You can also consider picking up some merch. And, you know, this is my, you know, I do not at the moment have any sponsors or anything like that. I don't work for CCP. I work for you guys, and that's very important to me. So if you like what I do and want to consider supporting it, you can become a member on YouTube, which gives you access to edited videos early, as well as the Patreon, both of which give you access to my supporter-only channel, where, again, like, I talk about things and you can influence, like, you can tell me what you want me to do, etc., etc. But yeah, let's see. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else, guys? I would say keep an eye on Skinner right now, because, like I said, we just had a sale on the production of skins. So chances are you might be able to get some skins for a little bit cheaper than they were before on Skinner. If anything, please check out Punchanello skins. They're cool. No. Anything else? Anything else? Anything else? Last chance. I guess we'll meet back here tomorrow, hopefully, on Singularity. So I've been Ashtarothi. Come raid curse. Yes. I've been Ashtarothi. Join Minmatar Militia. That's right. Hell yeah. Come hang out with us. We don't just play EVE. We do other things too. But yeah. Man, I feel like, hold on. I feel like there's something else I've been wanting to talk about. Let me just double check. Because it's always true that, like, afterwards I'm like, oh, that's what. Nothing I can see right now. So remember, Singularity is going to be open all week. how come you joined Minmill rather than going back to Galmill? Honestly, a big piece of it was that we, like, it's with invited, and like, so we set up a bunch of stuff for the Angel faction warfare, and so when like Angel faction warfare wasn't quite as satisfying as we wanted, it was our way to kind of participate in that world without, like, as close as possible, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm not above dabbling in Galmill, but I was in Galmill for like 10 years, so it's one of those things that, like, it's just kind of worked out right now. Yeah. It's been fun. All right. I've been Ashrothi. Yeah. And I like Galmill. Galmill's great. But, I'm also really, really tired of fighting Calmill. Like, not gonna, like, Calmill are just... I hate interacting with them. I've been Ashrothi, the voice of New Eden. Until next time, I'll see you in space. Feed the guineas!